Welcome to the Women in Comics International Panel. Women in Comics was founded in 2012 by our illustrious creator, Miss Regine Sawyer. She's not with us today because she lives all the way in New York. So that leaves me, the West Coast lead. My name is Danae Natsalia, and I am going to be moderating for you this evening. Who I have with us is a panel of experts in their field, and we are going to be having a interesting and fun conversation talking about own voices in the entertainment and comics industry. And so this has kind of been a big issue recently, the last few years, about whose voice is centered, who is getting voice and getting product out there. And so we're going to kind of talk about it a little bit today. First thing we're going to do is get to know each other a little bit. I'm going to have each of our panelists tell you a little bit about who they are and what kind of nerd they were when they were a kid and how it informs the nerd that they are today. Mostly because we're all different types of nerds. Everyone has this one monolith of what nerd means, and it's so very different. And so I figured instead of me telling you who they are and what they do, they can do that and do that connecting it to who their childhood nerd was. I'm going to start on the far end with Marqueeda.
Oh, you ain't right. I'm just over here for a reason. I thought I was smart. School teacher got me, y'all.
Always told them to get you back.
Oh. Always. I forgot that rule.
Solid, you did a good job, man.
Anyway, I'm Jacquay LaStar. Nerd. Okay, so I didn't realize I was a nerd until like late in life. I was like that kind of Revenge of the Nerds dude. You remember the dude with the glasses from Revenge of the Nerds? We didn't realize he was a nerd until later on because he was cool. I thought it was just like artsy fartsy. Nobody kind of got me. And then it was like just a moment where we were at Anime Expo. I should have known. You go into all these cons and then you have like a moment. You go, wait. Oh snap! I think I'm a geek, y'all.
You sound like an otaku.
What?
You sound like an otaku because you had some big revelations.
Yeah, I did. And they're like, dude, you didn't know? Like, you're like, I'm doing like robotics and I'm in like video club and I stayed over the summer so I can do computer programming. I was all over the place. They're like, your nerd is so strong. How did you not know? So it's like, everybody's like, well, welcome, we're glad, you're loved and accepted. At least I did have friends. I didn't have many, I just had like a few strong friends that were like, hey, we're gonna do us, be us, and live our best lives as high schoolers, and then in college. In college is when I'm really like, oh, we just let go then, like, because everybody's a nerd in one way or another. So yeah, I go across things where I like the comics, the cartoons, the science, the tech. I nerd out about nature, just really random things. I can nerd about just about anything. I can do girly stuff with the fashion, the clothes, and the hair too. And then I'm interested in like how they're made and what to make them from. But anyway, I know there's other people on the panel and you guys want to hear all about me all day. But yeah, that's pretty much how I nerd out. And that's kind of like led to me geeking out about the internet, which is probably my strongest nerd out. It's what's probably most responsible for me being here in the room. That's how I discovered my interest in journalism, how I connected to finding my tribe and other types of nerds that are intersexual like myself, really came to being and decided that I wanted to share the particular nerd I was and help other people find strength and their superpower in their geek. And that's gotten me here today.
I love that, finding strength in your superpower. I love that, I'm gonna have to steal that. So, hi, my name is Jules Rivera. I am a comics artist. I just recently signed a 6-book deal with Turner Books for doing a whole buttload of sci-fi. Like, you are not, yeah, right, right? That's why I'm here looking like a sci-fi space witch, because hi, that's my brand. So anyway, in the very, very, very beginning, I was definitely a science nerd. I liked going to the science center and playing with balls and stuff, just experiencing, physical stuff in life. I was also a giant X-Men fan because I really, really liked how X-Men cartoons in the 90s, there were like a few cartoons on TV that were serious and interesting when all the other cartoons were like stupid fart jokes and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, man, it's like a serious-minded cartoon, man, with very serious mullets and stuff. So So science fiction is obviously a major cornerstone for me. And the big reason why I love science fiction is because you can take all the rules of society that normally apply to people like me. Hi, a woman of color, I'm not allowed to be smart or anything like that. Or I should be cleaning the floors right now, someone's gonna have to catch me. So, anyway, I have all these expectations on me, but sci-fi is the one place where I can just go, bye! And just reset the world the way I want to. Because I can do that, it's my story, I can do whatever the hell I want. So, that led me down a road, which was doing my own sci-fi comics for a while. I did a cyberpunk comic for a while, I was working on my own sci-fi comic for a while. I did urban fantasy, also like some fantasy, like I'll watch Game of Thrones, but only until somebody like gets burnt up by a dragon or bloody stuff happens. It's kind of like the bran flakes or like a raisin bran of TV. Like it's all bran, names and things I'm not gonna remember, and then raisin explosions. So that leads me to where I am today, which is, you know, a person who has to make 6 graphic novels of sci-fi happen in the next 3 years. Pressure. I am just glad to keep revisiting the gift of science fiction to the rest of the world in all the different many flavors and colors it can come in. Because everybody thinks that, oh, science fiction, we can't make it interesting anymore, it's been done. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you're only looking from the white dude's perspective, yeah, it's pretty exhausted, you know? You kind of got to let other flavors come into the pot, otherwise we're all just having gravy. Yeah.
If you've never met Jules before, that's her. 24 hours a day, all times. Love her.
Hi, I'm Ray Felix. The question was about geeks, when I discovered my first geek.
Tell us about who your childhood geek was and how that connects to what you do now.
Well, you know, when I was a kid collecting comics, I think we didn't feel like we were geeks. We were looked at Batman, we looked at Superman, and we wanted to be them. So we were exercising and working out and trying to. And then, you know, you go to school. School wasn't about education in the Bronx. It was really about fighting and surviving. So I don't think I started learning anything until I got to high school because we were constantly fighting. So all I remember in junior high school was wanting to be Batman and wanting to survive every day in school. And so that's, I guess maybe that is a geek thing. And then when I was 15, I worked at a comic book store called Wild Comics, and I was probably the first cosplayer in the Bronx ever because I dressed up as the Joker when the Jack Nicholson movie came out. We rented out the theater, the Whitestone Cineplex, and we had only comic book, all our customers came, we just reserved it for them. And I was dressed up as the Joker, and people looked at me and they were like, what's wrong with you? Like, how are you dressed this way?
Yeah, was that in 89?
In 89. So they were like, what's going on? So I guess I'm an accidental nerd. I didn't realize I was a nerd because it was more about survival. I saw myself like a gladiator, you know? But fortunately,
I'm sorry, like laughing up in my head. Like kid walking through Bronx,
I mean, my mother got me out of the Bronx for that reason. She was like, oh, I know my kids. I'm not, no. I get it. Super get it though.
So I mean, it's good that I can say, hey, I'm a geek, I'm a nerd now at 45, you know? But, you know, it was more of survival, you know, growing up.
Got it, thank you.
Well, hi, my name is Jacquay Durant. I wanted to start off as a comic book nerd. I started off as a musical nerd. Anyone like musical theater, plays, and everything like that. So I was the anomaly in my family. I would make them watch all these musical theaters, and they were like, why are you torturing us? I was like, because it's interesting. It has stories and songs. And then my sister actually introduced me into anime, and that was my first venture into more of the manga anime world. And when I came to Anime Expo, I was like, oh my gosh, there's people who dress like me, who look like me, and they actually like the same things that I like. So that was my big push. And then now when I became an educator, when I saw how the different comic book world opened, that's what I brought into my educational career, is because that was my venture into reading. So I was a book nerd too. I read a lot, but when I saw manga and graphic novels, I was like, hey, there's pictures that can go with books, and it's not just for children. So that's what I like to bring into my classroom, because that was my first experience into the big world. Also, my whole team is Batman. That didn't help, that helped too.
I'm nothing like any of you. I knew I was a nerd from the beginning. Even if I didn't know, the other kids made sure I knew all the time. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit better, I want to start with you, Marqueeda, as our journalistic representative. Considering our recent incidents with artists like Brie Larson and how she brought attention to the lack of diversity in journalism. Oh, thank you, Siri. Sorry. I think Siri's got that question. So we've got Brie Larson, we've got Jordan Peele, and how he made the comment that I've already seen that movie, and now the whole journalistic world is crapping themselves. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm glad that last thing helped me with Brie Larson, because I'm like, what isn't happening to that woman? It's hard, for women and people of color when they enter a very large franchise fandom. There's always a fraction of toxicity and fandom, and Marvel, DC, and Star Wars have got the biggest ones. And so there isn't a thing she can say or do right now that isn't getting torn down one way or another. Even the coverage isn't always that helpful, because it's all about how you frame these things. It's very important to understand. I think sometimes with mainstream, there's this disconnect even with like the nerd world and not understanding that this toxic threat shouldn't exist, and that if you're not careful with your headlines and get your clickbaits and your likes and shares and stuff like that, you can kind of set the actress or actors up for a lot of harassment. And we remember this, the character Rose from Star Wars, how they weren't so careful and they weren't so protective, and she had to shut down her Instagram due to harassment from that toxic fraction. So I've been every time they announce something about her, things that have nothing to do with Marvel or her being Captain Marvel and things of that nature, like she just did her director debut with it's coming out on Netflix, and they trashed that, or the fact that her movie was tanked like a month before it came out. It's definitely important things to understand and have different people in the room. So I feel, from what I've read from her interviews that have happened since, like, I want to say January, February, she's become more conscious of the need to have other people in the room who will help her with that, who will facilitate that story the way it needs to be told. I mean, you can't crush the comments altogether, just don't read them, that's the vice. But you do have people, when they write these stories, they are not aware that those individuals exist out there, and they set you up for failure. With Jordan Peele, it was another thing about how you frame it. It's about context. It's about recognizing history in cinema.
So you don't think it was intentional?
No. I don't think
That
there's a
sounds like
problem
such an
with what he said, and
Yeah.
again,
Such an
what they
awesome
did is there's like that whole quote is about 2 small paragraphs, and what do? They go, oh, this is going to get us tons of clickbait right here, because if they put everything that led up to that like last line, then you're like, oh, I totally get what he's doing. He's not being hateful, or he's not excluding people. He's acknowledging that there is a well-documented, all you gotta do is go and look at movies. Go look at the movies in the last year, and you'll see what he's saying about who's in front, who's the lead. I mean, we just had a movie called Green Book that got Oscar, and the story is a story that has everything to do with the African-American experience, yet we are playing support characters to our own narrative. That's a problem.
I think Spike Lee said driving Miss Daisy in reverse.
Right, exactly. Pretty much.
Which I thought was hilarious.
And who's getting all the awards and accolades for this very African American story? The white black people, I can tell you that much. And so it's really important that we frame these. And I know it's hard sometimes, because it does take a certain investment of the reader. We also are part of the equation. What you click on, what you read, what you share. If you don't like the narrative that's being told out there by journalists, help them help themselves, because they have editors, they have bosses, they have bottom lines that not the journalists themselves necessarily is concerned about, and they'll still fight to tell the stories as they should be told. That's what often my colleagues are doing, yet they're losing their jobs behind it. So there's a lot of there's a lot to it that I think a lot of people don't think about. It's like, well, why would they just post that? Because they have bills. It's sad, but this is reality. Everybody's got to eat. And so you can freelance, but even that gets hard because then they might not call you back. So still human, still have a lot of needs, but I really think it was taken out of context and ran that way so they could get all the clickbait. And we have to stop giving in to the clickbait, the fake outrage, getting us all worked up. They found a way to monetize that. For every group that exists out there, I've read articles where they have literally, it's so out of context that it's almost a lie to make that the headline. But they know you're going to share it if they do it. And then if you bother to read it, you'll find out you've been duped. But unfortunately, a lot of us are not doing that. So yeah.
I keep hearing you say they, and that kind of leads me to my next question, and this is for
Okay.
anyone. Who is they? Who is controlling these narratives? Who is this big magic they who's out to make us all attack one another and click and share? Where is that coming from?
The Russians.
Oh boy.
Time out.
I mean, there's already systems in place that enforce, the will of the media and the will of, what the American public wants to see. Like, okay, sometimes I'll hate watch The Bachelor, and I really have to stop doing that because it's just getting so much worse. But I'm watching these narratives get reinforced that, oh, black women are aggressive. I'm like, really? We're doing this? It is 2019, we're still doing this crap? And, the Beckys always have to be the heroines, and we always have to make sure that the hero is not racist, even though it's pretty racist. And, these establishments, they know that the culture is this way, and they're just banking on it. They don't care. They're not about making anybody a better person or making the world a better place. It's The Bachelor. You know what you're getting into.
It's about ratings, that's all.
Yeah, it's all about ratings, and it's a very kind
I want you
of...
to tune in.
Yeah, and it's a kind of savage, almost parody of what American prejudice started as, and now it's just, well, we're just reinforcing the crap that's already there, and, people will buy into these narratives because they're familiar, so sure, let's just do it the old-fashioned way. It's really just kind of this really cynical, racist, there's a lot of ists involved there, but like intersectionalist crap, that just, a lot of it is just fed by cynicism that profits off of it. Oops.
I think that they is the corporations.
Right, I was going to say that. It's not magical, mystical conspiracy theory.
Right.
There's people, executives,
corporations.
where their only concern is the bottom line.
Right. It's about making money. And it's also fear of a female planet. I mean, let's face it.
Oh no, girls!
A lot of countries have had a female president, and we've yet to. And they've used our model of how we run our republic. I didn't say democracy, how we run our republic, and they find to have female presidents, like where my wife is from in Taiwan, they have a female president. So many countries, India, I believe, had a female president. So what are we afraid of? I think some old men in the White House and old men in Hollywood and old men in corporations and old men that are polluting the planet are afraid of change. And they promote their message to, stain all of us so that we start to doubt progression and being progressive. And we fall into that.
I would even argue that they is us, because if you think consumerism, I mean, if you buy into it,
then you're part of it.
they're like, oh, well, they like it, let's just keep putting out the same thing again and again and again and again. So it's almost this cycle of, or this system that we keep on thinking, oh, they is someone other than me because, oh, I don't participate, but then we are participants in the they. So it's just like we like to point fingers rather than looking at the mirror reflection. If we're going to change something, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
So how are we bringing these other voices, these different perspectives, these different stories into a narrative that's not meant for them? Or we're bringing in these voices to where now we see, like with, what is it? The movie with the Crazy Rich Asians, where you have an all Asian cast, and then now it's like it made so much money, but the expectation was that it was going to fail. But it was a different story. It was something new, a new narrative, and this system that was meant to suppress voices such as that.
They're calling it Yellow Panther. Like
they don't gotta do that. But no,
It's
unnecessary. But I
We're
totally
talking about
agree
as far
with.
as box office is concerned. That's what they're talking about.
I don't think that's necessary. I want people to all have like their own lane so they can grow. Because we don't want a one-off. We want there to be another movie. They're always talking about Asian superhero movies, so that's great.
Yeah.
That probably wouldn't have happened without Crazy Rich Asians.
Without Crazy Rich Asians or Captain Marvel or
Black Panther.
Black Panther.
Right. So, I mean, it definitely comes down to we are part of they, because there's a lot of people, when you start putting out the stuff that we're talking about is more inclusion, diversity, you have to go out and support it. And we are doing that because Captain Marvel, despite all the sabotaging that happened, is still killing it in the box office. It's a good movie. I mean, hey, we're not going to get here. This is not a critique panel. It's not perfect, but it's still a good movie.
It's not perfect because any Marvel movie is perfect.
No. I have so many problems with Infinity Wars, but nobody wants to hear that slander right now. I will come for Infinity Wars. So no, they're not perfect. And people, but to your point, people need to remember that when Infinity Wars came out, they had problems.
Yep.
And there was no one to single out and say, well, it's because there's a woman lead. Well, now just in this case, you happen to have a woman to lead. It's not perfect, so you go there. But when you remember all the other movies that came before it, you had problems then. It's okay to critique things. We want things to get better. That's why we're having this panel. Now,
I don't know what you mean. Ultron was perfect. There were no flaws in Ultron.
Well, I think the problem is that some fans, I guess, and critics expect Marvel to have this comedic pop type of feeling to the film, and I think Captain Marvel was lacking in that, and I think that's fine because I'm kind of like tired of the slapstick humor and the ad-libbing of these actors and not really using, it's formulaic and they don't really care about the source material, and I think that it was a serious, straightforward movie, and they couldn't handle it.
Can we talk about the fact that maybe these movies aren't made for us?
Right. I was just going to bring that up. I said, do you think that some people are having a problem with it? This goes back to, I think, the question I was asked earlier about people who are covering these movies, and they're not from the nerd world. You know, comic book movies have never been hotter. They've never made more money. And so we're getting back into that. I'm going to give you 50 million comic book movies because they make $1 billion every time you put one out. I don't really understand it.
Like it.
Exactly. I don't get why. Let's do it. Hit it. And then you have a lot of people who critique movies and they're not used to critiquing comic book movies, not knowing that they run the spectrum of feelings from serious to dark humor. I particularly like the dark horse type comics myself. I'm not a big superhero person. So I like the darker comedy type ones that are the ones that are just reflecting the darkest parts of us back. And so they don't know that exists. They think all comic books are just cartoons on paper and that they're goofy and they're ha-ha and they'll save the day. And they stereotype us. They put us in a box as nerds and think they can keep, doing it. But I think Marvel is smart to say, hey, we gotta change it up because we know our people. And even though the executives in Hollywood don't always know, they're looking to make this $1 billion. That's what it comes down to. The they are pretty much the people you never see. They don't come to Comic-Con. They never give out interviews. They're in boardrooms somewhere making these decisions. And no matter how much you try to inform them, they're like, I've been in this business 30, 40 years. I've been making movies since you were in diapers or before you were born. And I know what I'm doing. And then, something flops because of their interference. And here we are. But I think
that's like a whole trope on TV tropes, executive meddling. That's a whole thing.
But it's real though.
It's so real.
It's real though.
So real.
Well, I think that Hollywood, superhero movies to Hollywood is like manga to the Marvel and DC universe in comics. When people feel threatened, some fans, they come, like the older fans. I'm talking about like my generation. They're like, why do my kid like manga? Why do they keep reading this crap? Why can't they like superheroes? And I'm actually quoting an actual quote that was on Facebook. And I told them, I said, well, Marvel and DC have been writing the same stories and regurgitating the same trash in comics, in video games, and in film. They're the same stories being retold over and over again, where manga is a breath of fresh air. Manga is diverse. It's not just Pokemon. They have, you go to Japan, they have comics on business, comics on cooking, comics about careers, comics about everyday life. It's not just the stuff that comes here. And we don't have that. Everything's superheroes, and superheroes are limited. And I think that's why Image and Dark Horse have always done well, because of Sci-Fi and the independent. The only reason why Marvel is doing black superheroes and black sci-fi, because the independents have been doing it in your artist alleys and your small press for the last 2 decades. And they're finally catching on and saying, hey, maybe we should do this.
So I think, to your point, Vinny, you said it's written for us, and I think Jules brought this up earlier, is if you think about the comic books where they have a person of color, it's written by either a white man. So then now, it's like, if we bring these voices, like you're writing about a culture that you may not be a part of. And so as we see with Black Panther and these different movies, they're written from someone who's been a part of that culture, and we see a different representation. We're no longer the second string character, the third one who dies or gets eaten by a shark, whatever it is. We're actually
Wearing the red shirt and getting
when Samuel Jackson didn't die, I was like, yes. So what you have is now we're in the forefront, saving the people, being the hero, and then now it's a different narrative, it's a different perspective, because now we have our own voices, or someone who looks like that, speaking those voices, rather than someone who's just making a caricature, or a possible caricature, of these different groups and representations.
And it's a really lazy caricature too. It's not like they do research. The effort is hard.
Yes. You took that question way deeper than I was going. Right? Well, I'm good. You guys are taking over. I love it. What I meant is, as far as the spending population, the nerd population, are we the ones buying all the movie tickets?
No, I don't think so.
Probably not. So there's always that other consideration of they may not make the movies the way we like them, the way that's perfectly to the comic book and the way we
Oh, they don't care. They want brothers and grandmothers.
Oh, you're suggesting we have to share.
Brothers.
Now this is something that's really tough in the nerd community. The idea that we have to share, but we got picked on for watching these. We were kids.
Oh my God!
I was bullied for reasons. Yeah, me too. But guess who doesn't care?
Yeah.
Marvel, Disney, whoever's cashing that check. So that was kind of the route I was going. But you guys took it a good place. I feel you. Okay, we're going to go on. I want to talk to my independent creators here, my comic creators. How do you get your voice out there independently? And what are some of the obstacles to getting out there as a woman or a person of color? But also, what are some of those benefits?
Wow. Okay, I'll fill this one because I'm feeling this pretty hard lately. Okay, so I kind of have this theory when it comes to selling ethnicity. You gotta think of it like food, like flavors, right? Like, I've been putting out a webcomic for the last year, and it's called Love Jules. And it's just about me being, Latina, a woman, a real jerk. I swear a lot, and I scream, and I break a lot of things in this comic, and it's incredibly cathartic, and I love it. But just being really, really, really Puerto Rican in this comic, just as one, has been a really great catharsis. Like, oh God, I can finally talk about this stuff. But two, it's a flavor that you don't see very often. Like the kind of stuff that I do, I look around and I'm like, are there any comps out there? Or any other people who do quite what I do? I don't even know. So I joined forces with my writing partner, Jennifer Brody. And, in putting together our pitches and everything for our 2 properties, Spectre, 26, and 200, we were considering, yes, diversity. In fact, I'm about 95% sure she picked me because I was not a white person, okay? She wanted to work with somebody who has the perspective of somebody, from the other side of the train tracks, and you're not going to get a good sauce unless you're working with a chef who knows how to work with flavors, That's what I'm saying. So that is why, I take different perspectives into, putting these things together. And that's what's great about working with team stories is that you can work with a whole bunch of different flavors, and it's great. And it's a lot of fun. And I think that having that informed, opinion on diversity is actually helped me a lot. In the past, I feel like, not that many people were interested in hearing my pitches, not that many people liked my ideas about lady space fighters, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry you have bad taste. I guess I can't work with you now. A lot of times I had a hard time, but now with the new successes of, these big diversity tentpole movies, a lot of things are changing, and a lot of people are looking to get some more, so to speak, flavor in the sauce, because it makes money, and we're tired of breaking.
I think that, doing it ahead. Like I was just saying, small press has been doing this. It's not new. It's new for Marvel. It's new for the big companies to do it. Everyone that I know, like and Stephen Harris, Regine Sawyer, you ladies, and other people from the Women in Comics convention to when I did conventions in the Bronx, it's always been here. You're just discovering it because Marvel has billions of dollars in advertising, and you know, it's great. It highlights us as well because people are saying, oh, there is other stuff out there.
DC too, you guys keep picking on Marvel.
Oh, DC too? Oh, DC, I got a bone. I mean, DC came out, let me just throw this out there.
DC didn't have diversity until like the last year or so. Come on.
I mean, I worked with Trevor Von Eaton and Paris Cullins. That's the first and second Black Americans that worked in DC. The first one was hired in 1975. The second one was 1982. The only Black people that worked in DC Comics.
Wait.
DC Comics at that time was 50 years old, about 50 years old. So it took them almost 50 years just to get 2 employees that were Black. And then you had Dwayne McDuffie in the 90s. So there were like these jumps. But the thing is, America's different, America's changing. And when we write our characters, DC, like for instance, stole one of my characters and I had to write them a cease and desist for the Signal character, which was originally called the Lark, who was originally Black Robin. So my character, Black Power, the greatest hero, Black Power, was actually 10 years old now, 10 years old this year. They literally ripped the entire design, everything, and I had to say, DC, cease and desist, take a look at my comic book, because I've been selling in conventions like these for over a decade, well, 2 decades, it's the year 2000. But that didn't stop them. They're like, we don't think it looks a lot alike. And then you get lawyer calls back and forth. And my history with DC and Marvel is that I was sued by them for copyright infringement in 2010, and then we went to court for 4 years jointly, because DC and Marvel, I say DC and Marvel because they have the same lawyers. They're 2 separate companies, but they share the same law firm, and they share the same trademark. So when we talk about the big two is because they're incestuous. They're kind of really together, even though we see them as separate entities.
Uncle Grandpa.
So, and all these other things. Like I remember, was it Spider-Gwen or something like that?
Yeah.
I remember seeing a cosplayer like 6 or 7 years ago dressed up exactly like that character, and that character's maybe 3 years old. So it's these editors and these artists and these writers going out there, and they look at all you guys' creativity and they just swipe it. That's it.
Are you saying DC is like 90s but Madonna? Because I mean, that's clearly what that chick did. She went to the club.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. A lot of gay songs out there. Gay culture.
And then they copyrighted Madonna back. I think you spoke to the power is that they have the chance to do the legal business that you're not even aware that you need to do as an independent.
Right.
You're out there, grinding, trying to get the word out. Hey, take my zine, check out my website, check out my Instagram, my Twitter is lit, check it out. And they are scrolling around. I get followed all the time from people from big companies, and I'm always tempted to block them for that reason, because that's why they're doing that. They don't engage with you, you don't get a message from them. You're like, oh, I'm being followed by X, Y, and Z, big company. This journalist over here that, when we're in the room, because I do go to conventions, they never speak to me, but they're following me. And they'll use you as leads, they'll use you as inspiration, they will use you as a resource without actually saying, hey, let's collaborate.
Right.
I saw something on your page or Instagram or whatever, you tweeted something that inspired me. Let's get together, let me give you credit, let me build you up. And it's greed, but it's also this old adage where there's not enough room for everybody to eat. And clearly, especially now, where we have these super niche markets, there is room. Because everybody's not just behind what you create, but they're usually behind the person that creates it, because they understand you gotta eat. I'm glad we're coming to that realization, because that's the best way to get what you want to see out there is, coming together, pool it. You get 10,000 people to give $1, guess what? You got $10,000. That can go a long way, especially if you're sourcing the things you need along your assembly line. You know, somebody can hook something up, you guys do a little trading and say, hey, next time I have a printing thing, I'm gonna definitely come your way. I mean, it's the deals you make, it's the community you build. These are all resources we have. And sharing the knowledge of, hey man, I saw you got this great comic on your Instagram. I just talked to somebody from my neighborhood of South Central LA, and he has this great comic he's coming out with, and the subject matter is right on point with what everybody's doing. I said, you need to talk to somebody about protecting your intellectual property, because somebody's going to see that and scoop it. And he's like, oh, I got you. So he thankfully, he's already talked to somebody, but we often don't think to tell somebody that when we see cool stuff. So, yeah.
And trademarking and copywriting is essential, because they'll steal it anyway, but then you could say, hey, look, this is copyrighted, this is trademark. Like I have a personal relationship with some of the DC lawyers, because I can call them up and say, hey, look at this, what do you think? So I'm always getting like free legal advice. If you word things properly, people will give you, say, well, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do that. So I mean, you can't avoid it. It's in every field of entertainment, but you have to persevere and continue with it.
You might as well be aggressive in marketing yourself, because if other people are going to swipe from you, you might as well be the loudest voice saying what you're about to say.
You know, that does help you, because I've seen that happen with big brands, particularly the Kardashians. And people will come back and like out here. Exactly. That's literally all they do. It's like they're the Madonnas of today. I don't know. That's like my favorite like karaoke songs. I'm not like I sing her all the time. It's not hate. It's just it's facts. You know, it's just facts. It's true. But anyway, what I was saying is that sometimes if you build a community large enough that where everybody already knows this is something you're doing, a lot of times they'll come to your rescue and say, hey, you need to give credit, you need to pay, we're not going to buy this from you, we're only going to buy it from so-and-so. You can mobilize your community to help insulate you, because they can ignore one person, but they can't ignore everybody you're attached to.
All right, now let's talk about the classroom piece of it. I want to get you a chance to talk, y'all. I mean, I feel the energy, I do, but I want to make sure she has a chance to say something. All right, so when we talk about getting these own voices out there, we heard some of the obstacles, we heard some of the benefits. What does that mean when we're looking at a classroom, and how do you get those own voices in front of children, and what's the impact of doing that?
Well, as far as bringing that in, it's really looking at your students in front of you. So when I have my students, I think about, okay, so one is access. So what information can I provide them? Of course, looking at your standards, because the standards just require you to cite evidence. It doesn't tell you what text. You can use a graphic novel. So I teach in San Bernardino, and most of my students are Latinx students. So I'm thinking about what can I do to activate their information, and so how can I get them as part of representation. And so we bring in different sources, not even just about their experiences, but the idea of empathy, so looking at others. So we read different novels, such as the graphic novel from Malala, so learning about her story. And so what that looks like is giving them the chance to see different perspectives other than their own, because it's that global view and personality that they have that experience with. And so in the classroom, that's having that conversation of, let's look at someone else who has a different experience than you, and then how do you see yourself in that experience, as well as what do we learn from their journey, and what do we learn from their perspective. And so it's really creating that conversation, because they get to see it, and it opens up their mind and their mindset. Well, there's a world beyond me, there's other people who have some similar experiences as myself, and bring that together. And the impact is that students acknowledge that you are bringing in something that they like, as well as now that they have a different perspective, a different point of view about the world. And I think that's huge, because sometimes we can be very fixed in our minds, and letting them see the different areas and different cultures and have that conversation about that is opening up their world to something that they may not have been exposed to.
I always like to tell the story of, I had a student, I'm an 8th grade English teacher, and I had this student who was, he was one of those kids, like, oh wow, you need like Jesus and therapy and a hug from somebody that ain't me. He was one of those kids, and so I could not really, I was trying to find a way to connect to this kid, and Jules writes a lot of great comics.
What? Oh my gosh, I heard this story.
You've heard this story.
I have. So I'm like, wow, this is like, this is my story.
So I just showed up one day and I just left her comic on his desk. Now, he's a Latino young man, and her comic book characters are multiracial, diverse, and the main character is a Latino boy. Now, I couldn't get this boy to read to save my life, I kid you not. I picked up, and he didn't pay attention to a word I said during that lesson. He didn't listen to nothing I said, and part of me wanted to be mad, but I noticed he kept turning the pages. And he's reading the comic, and then he finishes it, and then the next day, I could not get it back from him. He read that comic back to back every day for about 20 days in a row until I finally I had the next one sitting on my desk, and he sat in front of my desk because that's what you do with that kid. He sits up right in front of your desk. And so I was hoping he would just notice that the next one was sitting there. And so eventually I just came over and I just tossed the second one on the desk. He was just, I can read this. I was like, you can take him home, baby.
Oh my
I can take him home. You know he didn't miss another day in my class. Not one more day. Representation.
Oh my God!
That's my nephew.
Yeah.
And the baby crying, that's mine too. I got the whole crew. But this is how important what she was talking about, getting kids to have that empathy. He showed up because I showed him himself through her work. He would have never gotten it if I, as educator, would have just put it there on his desk, and I would have never gotten it if there was not an avenue for a woman of color creator to create Latinx characters for me to throw in front of this young man and completely change his educational experience.
And now he's reading.
And now he's reading.
And he's reading, and now he has skills, reading skills, literacy skills, and then now it's just like that hunger that you described, running after the other, and then that's just one doorway into how many other things that he could read.
That is so powerful. That's why I do what I do, right? Like, oh, yeah, so.
It was wonderful, and I didn't have to go off on him anymore.
Yay!
So thank you for fixing my school year. All right, let's talk intersectionality, you guys. You're all from different veins. You've got educators, journalists, and creators up here. So I want to know, how is it that your worlds intersect, and how do we create this inclusive world for the next generation? We're still here having all this hemming and hawing going on in the world right now. But how do we pull together our veins, our areas? How do we support each other so that the next generation are not still fighting these same fights? What do we do?
I think we're human and we're going to always have those fights, but what we can do to bring it together is to start joining forces and do what the big guys are doing. You see that corporations are getting different talents together and pulling different talents. I think you have to start cooperatives and just have cooperatives of artists and writers and vetting people of the same like minds who are creative and not about the drama and about being progressive and putting, not just entertainment, but having social justice issues in that entertainment and educating people through your entertainment. Like, some of the comics that I do are all linked with history.
You didn't tell us the name of your comic book, shameless plug time.
It's Bronx Heroes is one of the titles. The greatest hero, Black Power, is one of the characters. He's an alternate reality of Muhammad Ali. We have the Roach, who is our Hispanic character, who is inspired by me and my brother killing roaches as kids and turning him into a superhero. And then we have Brother Lone Star, who is a black cowboy, and it talks about the black cowboys and the history of black cowboys and the rodeo masters. And my very first Bronx Hero character was Imana, the runaway slave, which is based off of slavery in New York. Because we always heard about slavery in the South, and it was based on a true story of a slave who escaped and swam into Sputneville in the Bronx and escaped through the Harlem woods when Harlem was a forest. And then it's basically a pirate story. And I think that young people are attracted to that because they're like, black cowboys? Slaves that escaped in New York, not the South? Muhammad Ali is a superhero. Some people know, Muhammad Ali was a boxer, but he was so much more. And I think that if you entertain people, you can, teach them at the same time. Put your values behind those books. We're not going to get rid of the garbage that's being spewed day in and day out on social media and on the news, but we have to persevere through it, and educate each other and support each other and the Women in Comics convention, when Regina and I started it, I was like, you guys need your own company. I mean, we started with gallery shows and then conventions, and I was like, Regina, you guys need an all-female comic book company. If Japan can do it, the United States can do it. And I think it's coming together, right? These panels.
It's been fantastic.
It's coming together.
Now we have the West Coast playing. Hey,
Right, so it's coming together, you know. I call it the Fight Club, you know. We started with an idea and then grew out, and now it's, you know, like, sometimes I'm like, Regine, what's going on? How many vendors we have? Oh, we have 50 vendors. I was like, wow, how did that happen?
Now, any other comments on the intersectionality and what we can do?
Okay, well, I think in order to create a diverse story, you have to understand every last character in your story, okay? You can't lean on lazy little stereotypes, can't lean on crap you might have. You have to make friends with people, you have to talk to people, you have to get into their stories, and at the same time, you have to broadcast your story. And what is your story? Identifying what that story is so important. And yeah, I'm standing at the corner of, well, I'm a woman, and, you know, I guess I'm Latina, and, you know, I guess my sexuality is like, I don't know, I mostly just hang out with dudes, I don't know, straight-ish, anyway, or no, wait, hetero-flexible, that's the term I heard. So, anyway, I'm standing on this intersection, and I have, so standing in this intersection of all of these experiences, and I'm weaving all this stuff together to make my comics, but at the same time, I watch a disgusting amount of like Korean television. What I love about Korean television is that in the first 5 minutes of anything, somebody is getting smacked, somebody's dying, some stuff is going down. It's just, it's so intense. I love it. What else? You'll watch, just reading everybody's different stories out there, making different friends with different people. I'm making comics with my friend Felicia, capturing the American Black woman experience. And, I couldn't make those comics on my own. I would need Felicia's input in order to be able to put out these. Otherwise,
Felicia.
What was that?
I said, why she gotta be Felicia? You need to talk to your black friend after this.
That's literally her name! That is literally her name. We called the comic Hi Felicia just because we wanted to snap on that, because that's her name and she hears that crap every time.
Oh, I know the comic. No, it's spelled differently, so it's her friend. And
that's literally her name!
But it's so funny too. If you have a question, now's a good time.
It's spelled differently. But I want to add to the last question as well. I would encourage people that intersexuality exists in all of us, and to look at your life experiences. Your life is the most unique skill set you'll ever have. Nobody can take that from you, nobody can compete with it. So look within yourself, and if you feel like, well, I haven't had enough experiences, go out and have those experiences, because you having those experiences, you going out, traveling, going to places you may not have tried before, your frame, your angle, will be something that no one else has, and then you can pour that into anything you wish to create, and then it'll facilitate opportunities to find people to collaborate to find a tribe, to find a larger community that you can build together. You can pull in resources. I always encourage people to look at the communities that already exist wherever they may live. If you live in a small town, you know everybody, nobody's down with comics in your small part of the world, there's always the internet. Find communities there, build, travel to those places where I think I've met everyone on this panel online first, and then in person second. And it really expanded my world. When I discovered art, it expanded my world. When I first traveled out of California, it expanded my world. And I've always seeked out those who are different from myself, because it enriches who I am as a person. So never feel that you're closed in for any reason. I think that's how you handle it. You just run towards it. Remember, it's not our differences that divide us, it's our lack of ability to recognize them and celebrate them is often the problem. We're scared of difference. We've got to embrace the difference so we can get to the commonality that exists in all of us.
And I think just to piggyback, just to piggyback off, the willingness to be uncomfortable. You kind of have to take that step out and then have that courage to say, you know what, I'm going to try this, I'm going to do this, and have that innovativeness. Because especially in the classroom, it could be like, well, you don't know that much about this. Like, yeah, but I'm gonna do my research, I'm gonna know, so when I speak, I don't have to be the full authority, but I can at least make that leap and be intentional about the moves I'm gonna make because I know it's gonna benefit the greater.
All right, we have a question. Yes, sir. Tell us who you are and what would you like to say?
Hey everybody, I'm Silver Crave from Back in the Day Productions, and I have a question. It's kind of a heavy one because those are the only kind I ask. So, do you find effective diplomatic ways to say to people with your work and the things that you were trying to, I guess you can say, expose to the world, that though it was not specifically made for you, you can still come and enjoy it? Because I find that you brought up the Brie Larson thing a little bit earlier, and some of the pushback is, well, this wasn't made for you, this specific group. And the pushback has been, well, if it wasn't made for me, then I'm not allowed. How do you use, or how do you inform people that that thought is an incorrect thought in which to move on?
I find that so weird that that's how we view things, because like I said, a lot of stuff that's the hottest stuff right now on television is extremely niche. You know, you have Insecure by Pizza, you've got Donald Glover's Atlanta, you know, you've got a lot of different shows out here that are extremely, I can't remember the name of it, it's on TBS, and our Weird City that's on YouTube. I mean, that's super niche, and yet somehow, some way, we manage to find ourselves in that. We like, maybe it's the advertising that's helping us, but I think it's the marketing.
But
But it's a mental block that's there for us, because if we allowed ourselves just to like, hey, I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna just check out this movie, I'm gonna check out this TV show, I'm gonna pick up this comic book and read it, we probably find something like we relate to, because there's commonality in all of us, but we gotta get past this, we're different thing. Like, you're always gonna be somebody you're different in. And I think if we could just kind of push that into the culture, because literally everything that's hot right now is super specific to who's creating it.
Thank you so much. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but we are out of time. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for your time. If you want to catch anybody, they'll be right outside the doors.